Send your kid off to sea on a boat, lol? My sister-in-law suddenly said with a smug grin. It seemed she wanted to rattle me during our beach day. But this time, I wasn't biting. My daughter's right there, you know, pointing to my daughter in the shade. My sister-in-law's face changed color instantly. Huh? Then who is that kid? Rushing back towards the sea, she found an irreversibly tragic scene unfolding before her eyes. My name is Karen, a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband, Mark, a year older than me, through a friend, and married him after a year of dating. The following year, our daughter Emily was born, and she is now 6. Life was good. My relationship with my in-laws was great, but my sister-in-law, Nancy, has been a thorn in my side since day one. Nancy is 9 years older than Mark and took care of him when they were kids, so she's probably a bit protective. Her words always carried a tinge of resentment, as if she'd lost her brother to me. But we only met twice a year, during holidays, so I could tolerate it. Then one day, Mark got assigned for a year-long job transfer. I had just found out I was pregnant with our second child. Why not stay with my parents during my assignment? Concerned about living alone with Emily, I agreed to stay at my in-laws until he returned. Life was pleasant, especially with my warm-hearted in-laws saying, "Feel free to ask for help." However, about 3 months in, Nancy, who'd gotten divorced, moved back in. If you cared for Mark, you'd support him rather than staying here. You're so selfish, she sneered at me, initiating a new round of harassment. As soon as Nancy saw my face, she snorted and glared at me, hurling cold words my way. That's when the harassment started. That day, Mark was coming home after a long time, taking a few days off work. I was in the kitchen since early morning, cooking his favorite dishes. Suddenly, Nancy slid up next to me, reached over, and started eating the freshly made food. This stuff is so bad, I can't let Mark eat it. With that, Nancy spat out the food she had just tasted, grabbed the entire pot from me, and threw it all in the trash. Why would you do something so awful? I made this especially for Mark. Shut up, you have no taste. Mark prefers the food I make. Ignoring me, Nancy started taking ingredients out of the fridge and began cooking something for Mark. When Mark arrived at his parents' house, Nancy proudly displayed the dishes she'd prepared. Mark, unaware of what had transpired, happily said, "Well, it's been a while since my sis cooked for me. Brings back memories." Feeling dejected but not wanting to make Mark feel bad, I held back my complaints. Eventually, Nancy started acting terribly even toward our daughter, Emily. I noticed Emily crying softly, looking worn out. Such a noisy brat. Isn't she too old to cry like this? Must be your lousy parenting. Those cruel words were aimed at me. I'm sorry, Emily is sensitive. She gets fussy when she's tired. What's that? Emily, stop crying or I'm throwing away your toy. Annoyed, Nancy destroyed Emily's favorite toy right in front of her. Emily was so shocked that she started to cry even harder and became scared of Nancy, hiding behind me whenever she saw her. Despite enduring Nancy's awful behavior, when Emily started to calm down, we learned that my in-laws had won a resort hotel voucher and we were all going. Mark was initially unable to attend, but eventually managed to join us a day late. That's when Nancy, who had earlier said, "I'm not going," suddenly decided to come along. The moment Mark said he would join, her attitude changed drastically. I couldn't help but be stunned by Nancy's possessive behavior toward Mark. On the day of our family vacation, we decided to spend the first day at the beach, as per Emily's wish. True to the peak season, the beach was bustling with people. I had no idea that something dramatic would happen there. Since I was 7 months pregnant and couldn't play with Emily as much, my in-laws took over and played with her. Emily seemed thrilled riding on an inflatable boat in the shallow water. She kept asking my in-laws for one more ride. After playing for a while, my in-laws went to the restroom, but they were taking forever to come back because it seemed crowded. While waiting for them to return from the restroom, I was quietly watching the ocean. Suddenly, Nancy, my sister-in-law, appeared in front of me, hand on her hip. "I let your kid drift off to sea in the boat. LOL?" She smirked, saying something bizarre. "Emily is right there." She was napping under the umbrella. "What? How?" Nancy pushed past me to check on Emily, then started to panic. "Oh, then who did I set adrift? What should I do? Nancy, what happened? Please explain." Visibly flustered, Nancy told me, "I let a little girl drift off to sea in the boat." Seeing my in-laws coming back from the restroom, I yelled, "Please look after Emily," and rushed towards the sea, clutching my belly. By the time Nancy sprinted back, the boat was nowhere in sight. "Where did it go?" While scanning the water, Nancy screamed. "Ah, there it is." Shockingly, the inflatable boat had capsized, leading to the worst possible outcome. "Where's the kid? We need to call for help. Quick." I don't know." Nancy dashed off somewhere, and anger welled up in me at her utterly irresponsible behavior. "There's no sign of the child near the boat. If she's drowning, this is serious. I must get help now." While I was asking nearby people for help, a surfer emerged from the ocean carrying a little girl. "Is that the girl who was near the inflatable boat?" He nodded and explained the situation. The boat had capsized while they were drifting. When the surfer found her, the girl had swallowed a bit of water and seemed like she had been drowning. "Are you all right?" Just as I called for an ambulance, the girl's mother, startled by the commotion, arrived. In a state of utter shock, she was assisted by paramedics and went with them into the ambulance. Watching the child being carried away on a stretcher, I felt dizzy, overlaying the scene with the image of my own daughter Emily. This could have been Emily in this dangerous situation. As a parent myself, the mother's frantic concern was tearing my heart apart. I was resolute that I could never forgive Nancy for doing such a terrible thing, and decided to take action. The next day, wanting to know if the girl was all right, I remembered the name of the hospital the paramedics mentioned and went to visit. The receptionist said they couldn't disclose personal information, but just then the mother from yesterday passed by and recognized me, taking me to her daughter's room. The girl's name is Mia. Her complexion looked good, and she smiled brightly at me. She was fine and could be discharged soon. I was relieved, but also apologized for what had happened at the beach. "Are you pressing charges?" "Don't worry, I've already spoken to the cops about what happened yesterday," Mia replied energetically, showing how mature she was. "That's great to hear, but I'm sorry you had a scary experience." "Yo, it freaked me out, but I'm fine now." Watching Heather's spirited replies, her mother reassured me. "She's told the story clearly, so I think it's understood." While chatting with Mia's mom for a bit, I discovered some shocking information. Armed with details that could really corner Nancy, I exchanged contact info with Mia's mom, asked her for a favor, and then left the hospital. As for Nancy, both my in-laws and I had been trying to reach her, but she was completely Mia. Later, when I returned to the hotel and was updating Mark about yesterday's events, we got a call from Nancy. "Oh, Mark, you're checking into the hotel today, right? Sorry I can't be with you," she said as if nothing had happened yesterday, confusing Mark. And satisfied, I took over the phone right away. "That girl was saved. You know, why did you run away yesterday? You left her and the boat drifting offshore. That's extremely irresponsible." "Oh, is that so? Well, good for her then," Nancy responded without admitting any fault, and abruptly hung up. My anger toward Nancy, who acted like this was someone else's problem even after doing such a thing, kept boiling. The next day, when we returned home, Nancy's shoes were right there at the entrance. Moreover, seeing us, she casually greeted us, "Oh, welcome back," which made me clench my fists in suppressed anger and confront her. "Where have you been, Nancy? Do you even realize what you've done? Are you still mad about that? She's safe. So what's the problem? She seemed to have run away to a friend's place to avoid our scolding." But hearing that the girl was fine, she had returned home, believing the heat had died down. "You really don't get it, do you? Who do you think you are to get preachy with me?" she snapped back without showing any remorse. Just then, the doorbell rang. "It looks like the little girl's mom is here." When I escorted the girl's mother into the room, Nancy's face turned pale, and she began to mumble, "Why? What's happening? Nancy, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" "It's just, that woman is my client." Nancy's voice was so low, it was as if all her earlier bravado had vanished. Turns out, the girl's mother and Nancy knew each other. When I introduced myself at the hospital, Mia's mom said, "So you are Karen Belleville. We have a Belleville at my office too. Rare last name, isn't it?" She seemed surprised. Later, the conversation got lively, and it turned out she was the point person at the temp agency where Nancy is registered. So it was that Belleville who did this. "Absolutely unforgivable," she said, clearly angry. I had already reached out when I saw Nancy's shoes at the front door, because I just couldn't forgive what my sister-in-law had done. "Please apologize properly. This is totally unacceptable," Mia's mom strongly agreed, and shot Nancy a stern look. "Unbelievable that you'd put my daughter at risk, after all the hassle you've caused at work." Then, unbelievably, Nancy started yelling at us. "You're blaming me without any proof. We've already confirmed that it was you who showed the pictures to the little girl and took her on the boat. Just so you know, the police are aware, too." According to what my mom heard from the police, multiple witnesses saw Nancy taking a little girl out on an inflatable boat towards deeper waters. How can a child's word be any proof? There were many people around. If you can't definitely say it was me, then no one's testimony counts. Even now, Nancy wouldn't admit her guilt. But I had a hunch why she mistook my daughter, Emily, for Mia. "You confused the kids, didn't you? Emily and that girl have a similar build and were wearing similar swimsuits." It seems she took Mia, who was wearing a sun hat and playing at the water's edge, out into the ocean without really checking. The words Nancy had said to me, "I left your kid drifting off the shore in a boat, LOL," were the most damning evidence, and she didn't even realize it. Initially, Mia seemed to enjoy the inflatable boat, but when she realized she was alone, she screamed in terror. Then she lost her balance, flipped the boat, and got thrown into the water. Fortunately, a nearby surfer quickly came to rescue, so no major harm was done. Finally, Nancy, who had been silent, clenched her lips, turned to us, and spoke up. This is so infuriating. My brother, who I doted on, is marrying you, and I'm getting divorced. It's all your fault that my job isn't going well. Don't blame others for things not going your way. First off, that's no excuse to put a child in danger. Don't lecture me just because things are going well for you. Karen couldn't find words to describe Nancy's selfishness as she tried to justify her actions. That's when the police, whom I had alerted, arrived. Nancy was taken away on suspicion of child abduction. I didn't do anything wrong. Isn't it enough that the girl is safe now? This is ridiculous. Nancy made a scene, trying to vindicate herself. But she was told off by our parents-in-law. Enough is enough. Admit your mistakes and reflect on them. She then clung to Mark, asking for his support. Mark shook off Nancy's hand in silence and handed her over to the police. It seemed he couldn't bear to see any more of his once kind sister's disgraceful behavior. She then turned to me, pleading for support. I will never forgive you. You could have killed her. Realize the gravity of what you've done and truly reflect on it. Everyone had abandoned Nancy, who was led away by the police in a daze. Nancy is now facing charges for putting a young child, Mia, in danger, and is even being sued for damages by Mia's parents. On top of that, it seems that Karen, who has caused trouble multiple times at her temp job assignments, is getting her registration suspended and might also be blacklisted by affiliate companies. Even when she gets out, she won't have a job waiting for her at any temp agency. Our family, including the parents-in-law, have cut ties with Nancy. From now on, she's on her own. As for me, my pregnancy is going smoothly, and the due date is approaching. Mark and I will do our best to ensure the happiness and safety of our daughter and our soon-to-be-born child.